All right, hello, my fans. All right, so this is just the next part of Chapter 9. So this is Chapter 9b. And basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be solving. We're going to do more solving polynomial equations. Okay, so we're going to actually do some factoring. Factoring is part of last chapter. It's part of this chapter. It's part of the next two chapters after that. So factoring is actually huge. Huge, huge. All right, so today we're going to talk about something called the zero product property. Okay, you have to try to remain calm. This is very exciting. All right, so this is the deal. If I give you two terms here, and actually let's just do numbers here, okay? And if I tell you the product of those two numbers has got to be equal to 0, okay? And I give you a number of 105. What does this number have to be? Don't you agree this number has to be 0? Because 0 times 105 is going to be 0. I can give you another term, and I can say the first number is 8100, and that's got to be equal to 0. Don't you agree that this term right here has to be 0? Okay? So the deal is that one of those terms has to be 0. So let's kind of actually start out with a problem here. If I had x plus 2 times x minus 3 equal to 0. How could this be equal to 0? Well, don't you guys agree that either that is 0 or that is equal to 0? It's one of those two. So that's what the zero product property is what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, one of them is going to be equal to 0. So I'm going to set x plus 2 equal to 0, because that's got to be, if that one's 0, then I'm good. If this one is 0, the x minus 3 equals 0, I'm good also. One of those two has to be 0. So it's x plus 2 equals 0. I'm going to solve for x. So x equals negative 2. All right, that's one of my answers. If I plug a negative 2 into that original problem, negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Then it doesn't matter what this is, because 0 times x minus 3 is going to be 0. Okay, but this can also be 0. So x minus 3 can also be 0. And I solve for x. So x equals positive 3. So I have two answers, one of two answers. I can either, in fact, that's what you're going to have in the blank. X equals negative 2 or 3. And that's the answer to this problem. So what you're going to do is, and let's just make a couple rules here. Basically, wherever you see a variable or a variable inside a parenthesis, you set the variable or the variable, or I should say, or the parenthesis equal to 0, and you solve for the variable. Okay? That's really important. Wherever you see a variable or a variable inside a parenthesis, you set that variable or the whole parenthesis equal to 0, and then you solve for the variable. So let me give you an example. If I have 2x times x minus 3 times 2x plus 8 equal to 0, but notice, math fans, it's equal to 0. Okay? If it's not equal to 0, you can't do the problem. So it's got to be equal to 0. So wherever you see a variable or a variable inside of parentheses, you set that variable or the parentheses equal to 0. I set 2x equal to 0. I said x minus 3 equal to 0. I said 2x plus 8 equals 0. Right? Wherever I see a variable or a parenthesis with a variable in it, set it equal to 0. So I got 3 answers. Divide by 2, x equals 0, add 3, x equals 3, and subtract 8, 2x equals negative 8, and then divide by 2. So x equals negative 4. So on the answer blank, you're going to put 0, 3, and negative 4. That's what you do. Okay, so let's try another one here. 5 parentheses x minus 8, 2x plus 3 equals 0. Well, see at 5 has no variable. I ignore it. If it doesn't have a variable, you ignore it. Okay, so that's out of there. I just have x minus 8 equals 0 and 2x plus 3 equal to 0. So I solve for x, add 8, so x equals 8, and subtract 3. 2x equals negative 3, divide by 2, x equals negative 3 halves. There you go, 2 answers. Okay, pretty easy. Let's do something. How about x plus 5 squared times x minus 3 equals 0. Well, that x plus 5 squared, it's really x plus 5 times x plus 5, right? Do you guys agree with that? I hope so. And you really don't even need to write that out like that. And the reason is because it's just, I'm duplicating it. In other words, if I have x plus 5 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0, I solve for x. I get x equals negative 5. So why do it twice? I mean, if I have the same thing, I'm just doing it one time. I get x equals negative 5, and this one x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3, x 3. So those are your 2 answers, negative 5 and 3. Okay? So that's kind of it. 2x squared. Yeah, I'll do another one here. Alright, so this is the deal. I got a 2x squared equals 0. If the variable is always by itself, if it doesn't have like a parenthesis around it, what's going to happen is it's always going to be 0. So x squared is equal to 0, and then x equals 0. Because you take the square root of both sides, you get x equals 0. So think about it though, math fans. If you plug a 0 into that, isn't 0 squared 0 times 2 is 0? And then 0 times anything here is 0? Okay, so if it's all by itself, it's automatically 0. And of course I got to finish it up here. 2x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1. So 2x equals negative 1. Divide by 2, x equals negative 1/2. So I got 2 answers, 0 and negative 1/2. Because either one of those could be 0, then the whole thing goes to 0. Okay? You know, and again, if it's 5 parentheses x minus 7, x plus 1 equals 0, there's no variable there. You can't set 5 equals 0. It doesn't even make sense. So it's x minus 7 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. So solve for x equals 7, subtract 1, x equals negative 1. Okay? Pretty straightforward, but that's called the zero product property. Again, because it's 0, because you got to get it equal to 0. It's product because these are all multiplied. It's x times 7 times x plus 1. So 0 product. So you set anything that has a variable or a parentheses with a variable inside equal to 0. And again, if it could be anything. It could be 8x to the 105 power times x minus 6 equals 0. Okay? That, I know that one is going to be x equals 0. I don't even have to divide by 8 and take the 105th root. I just know it's going to be x equals 0, for that's one of them. And then, of course, x minus 6 equals 0. So add 6. So x equals 6. Okay, so 6 and 0 is your final answer for that problem. Okay, the next lesson we're going to do is, you notice how everything's factored nicely here? Next problem, things are not going to be factored so nicely, and you got to factor first, and then apply the zero product property. Okay, that's it, math fans. Have a nice day. Goodbye.